Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small, and I want to thank everybody for joining me once again for today's show. As always, I want to talk about stuff that you may not be paying attention to, what you may miss in the normal cycle of events. Since my last video, we know that Kamala Harris has come out strong, has really sort of blown away all expectations. And that has been on the news, as well as Donald Trump making a total ass of himself in front of black journalists. That's also been in the news, so I don't need to recap that. I also don't need to recap the fact that the Democratic Party is buoyant right now. It is doing things that I think, a week, 2 weeks ago, we never thought was possible. Kamala Harris is packing in stages. She's doing extraordinary things that we didn't think that would happen. We were looking at a landslide loss. Donald Trump was looking at a landslide win, and I just think that we really didn't see what we're seeing today coming. So you could see all of that in the regular news programs. I don't need to recap that. What I do want to talk about today is something that I actually find very important and meaningful in today's time, right? Elections have consequences. We know right now in Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro has claimed to have won an election, which everyone else believes is he's stolen the election. Expect Donald Trump, by the way, to use that if he loses in November. Expect him to use the Maduro Venezuela storyline, as well as his acolytes, to talk about how we've become Venezuela after he loses the election, if that does in fact happen. But putting that to the side, I want to talk about elections have consequences. That's the title of today's show. And I really want to talk about a couple of stories that are very interesting to me. And we have to remember it's not just the presidency, but also Congress that's on the line. And lawmaking and laws have consequences. I think one of the things that, if you speak to conservatives and you ask conservatives, what is the 5 or 10 most important things conservatism has done for the American people, I think you would get a range of answers. But one of those would probably be that under conservatism, we've become more quote unquote free because of, getting rid of gun regulations and the like. So their version of what it is for government is less government. At least that's what it used to be until Donald Trump became in charge of the Republican Party. But let's just go there with what conservatives believe the role that they should play in government. It's to have as little government as possible. That's what they've said. Of course, I believe that's a scam. I'll talk about that at another time. For progressives, though, and for Democrats, you can point to specific things that we can look at in our lives. Every single president, through a government program, has done to benefit people's lives. The Affordable Care Act comes to mind, right? The Inflation Reduction Act comes to mind under Biden. There are things specifically, welfare, Medicare, Medicaid, that Democrats look at and progressives look at and say, see, when we become a part of government, these are the things that we're able to do. Barack Obama can also claim that he helped turn this economy around. Biden can say the same thing. Clinton could say the same thing, that when they came into office, our economy was in the crapper, right? We were going downwards. And every single the last 3 Democrats, including the current run, has come in and righted the ship, has turned around and made a crappy economy a better economy. So that is what good governance looks like. And I just wanted to point to these 2 stories, which I find interesting, and I want to talk about because what government does is important. And we have to recognize the importance of what government does. And these 2 stories are interesting because one is from Bloomberg, and it talks about Zelle. People might know Zelle, Cash App, etc. These are peer-to-peer payment apps that are on your phone. And they're right now debating legislation that could threaten the freeness of that service, right? You don't pay if you have Zelle, for instance. You don't pay anything extra for Zelle from your bank. But that could change because of legislation happening right now in the Senate. This is Democratic I think, an Elizabeth Warren sort of push towards more regulation, right? More regulation, more bills, more quote unquote big government if you're a conservative. But if you're a Democrat, if you're a progressive, this legislation is about curbing the scams that are out there that are inflicting financial pain on people who are using these apps because they're being scammed, and there is legislation that should prevent that. And then also, the NPR online has an interesting story about the EPA and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really a green energy act, which is providing solar poor people, to people who have less budgets, who have less money, and who are really struggling. And Donald Trump, of course, has threatened to undo all of that. But right now, it's providing free solar to the poor, which has drastically cut electricity bills for the poor and for the middle class. So, two stories about legislation that has happened in the IRA and in solar, and potential legislation that could happen in how we handle these peer to peer programs. So let's go into this. And we're going to begin with Bloomberg. And this is regarding, this is from Mark Rubenstein. This was again on August 1st. And it says Venmo and Zelle may not be free for much longer. Popular payment services are as convenient for fraudsters as they are for you. And let's be clear, I want to remind people that, particularly a guy like a Jamie Dimon and Chase, if you have a Chase bank account, one of the things that they do is immediately, as soon as some kind of a legislation comes in, and in any way sort of prevents them or boxes them in or begins to regulate them in a way they don't like, they pass that on to the customer. That's almost a trope, an absolute. You could bet on that anytime that happens, particularly with Chase and Jamie Dimon. They did that with regard to overdraft fees. They immediately started changing the way they did banking. They started increasing fees and whatnot. And it's become a different type of system for people who use those banks. They immediately begin to, as soon as a legislation comes in, they immediately begin to pass that on to customers. So, and their argument is that the reason why we're able to do these things for free for customers is because of the relaxed legislation. That is a dubious, I think, argument. But anyway, moving on. Going into this Bloomberg article, because it's fascinating. Last week, a U.S. Senate committee joined the debate over whether peer-to-peer payments are analogous to cash or to bank payment channels. It's an essential distinction for both customers and the companies that provide this free service. People began sending money to each other electronically in the late 1990s, but growth is now increasing exponentially and shows no sign of slowing. The value of P2P payments globally hit roughly 2.7 trillion in 2023 and is projected to grow to over 8 trillion by 2030. In the US, 72% of customers use platforms such as PayPal Holdings, Venmo, Block Inc.'s Cash App, and Zelle, up from 47% in 2018. Payments on Zelle alone now exceed total ATM withdrawals. Yet, while no bank would accept liability if a customer lost their wallet to a pickpocket, the senators' debate focused on who's responsible when fraudsters target electronic wallets. Last year, customers of the three largest lenders, Bank of America Corp., JP Morgan Chase and Company, and Wells Fargo and Company, lost a total of 370 million via Zelle, the platform these banks jointly own with four others. Legally, a bank's obligation rests on whether clients fall victim to a fraud or to a scam. In a fraud, money is transferred out of the user's account without their authorization, usually as a result of hacking. Under the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, banks are required to reimburse such losses. As long as the customer authorizes the transaction, though, even if fraudulently induced to do so, banks don't have to pick up the tab. Such scams are growing as fraudsters parade as bank employees, a love interest, or a potential new employer, often via social media. Banks argue that this is no different from cash. Treat Zelle like cash. The chief fraud risk management officer of Early Warning Systems, the bank-owned company that runs Zelle, cautions in a blog post July 8th. Just like your grandma wouldn't mail a birthday card with cash inside without confirming the mailing address, when you use Zelle to send someone money, you should make sure your money is going to the right contact. However, others see peer to peer transactions more akin to electronic payments and question why reimbursement rates at 26% in the case of Zelle are so much lower than credit card payments, 47%, or debit card payments, 36%, at the three big banks. Despite critical differences, the subcommittee agrees. Its report recommends extending purchase protection standards in credit and debit card markets to commercial peer to peer payments and amending the Electronic Funds Transfer Act to make fraudulently induced transactions subject to reimbursement. Such a move has already been adopted in the UK, where new rules requiring financial institutions to fully reimburse victims of scams come into force in October this year. US bankers aren't keen. We need to be thoughtful and think about unintended consequences. Adam Vanishi, Wells Fargo's head of payments for customer, small, and business banking, said at the Senate hearing. For now, Zelle transfers enjoy all the benefits of cash. Layer in the benefit of card payments too, and the no cost model may disappear. So, what's going on here? A few things, and let me first say because I normally put this up early on, but you can see the full article here, and I urge you to read the full article. I always put in snippets because I try to keep these videos as short as possible, but I usually put in snippets. So there are edits here to what I've read, but read the full article in the Mastodon, mastodon.vtip.me/@ what you missed. And you can go into the full article. But here we see right now regulation that will help to protect people who are victims of fraud. Now, I could argue either side of this. On one side, I probably think the conservative, small government, Republican side would be, why should the rest of us pay for the fact that people are not paying attention to who they send their money to? Why should the rest of us get hit with a bill and see a no-fee payment become a fee-based payment because of other people are not paying attention to what they're doing? On the other hand, I think that there's a compelling argument to say that this scam business affects all of us. If not us directly, someone that we know and love, elderly people, people who are young, people who are not tech savvy are getting caught up in these scams. And we don't want these, and it's not good for banks to be giving money to scammers because you never know where that scammer, what that scammer is really about, where they're from. They could be, a part of an organization that is bigger and larger and really means America harm, and they're looking to scam money from people. So, but this debate is what the government is supposed to be about. This is what we're supposed to be talking about, debating, not nonsense, which is what has, I think, for some extent, or I think to some extent, has really engulfed our our politics these days, let's just say. Moving on. This is from NPR, and this is regarding solar. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act was really a Green New Deal Act. And I mean, it was called the Inflation Reduction Act. I think everyone pretty much agrees that was for politics. This was really a green energy act. We know that the Republican Party has hostility towards anything green and renewable. We know that they are fighting for the fossil fuel industry, although they claim, of course, to be about small government, about not taking any interests, about laissez-faire, free market business. But we know that they're in the tank for fossil fuel. Donald Trump has gone on and talked about drill, baby, drill, etc. So they have a hostility towards solar. Some of it in renewables, not just solar. Wind is another one. Some of it's legitimate, others is not. And I don't want to go into the differences between the two right now, but I just want to go into this article because it's fascinating. And solar, listen, solar has a lot of problems still. The technology is still growing, it's still moving forward, but it also has a lot of solutions and it's also doing a lot of good. And this is I'm not going to go into the problems of rooftop solar, of these California dealing with too much energy and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure there are people out there who can point me to videos that are saying that there's a whole lot of wasted energy. I think that is a dubious uh, comment to say it's wasted. When you have renewable, you're not wasting it. I mean, only that it's not being used, you could use the term wasted. But I mean, I wouldn't call it wasted. It's just not captured. But it's not wasted because it's renewable. Waste implies that there is a finite supply. Renewables implies that it's infinite supply, which solar and renewable energy is infinite. As long as the sun shines, as long as the sun burns in the sky, and as long as we can get clear skies, we can have solar energy to use as a source of power. Of course, this is also creating equity in terms of, the poor. And that's what this article goes into. So this is from Julia Simon. This is August 1st, 2024. NPR Online, links on Mastodon, and it says why the U.S. government is spending $7 billion on solar for low-income homes. And let me go into this in detail right now. Later this summer, the Environmental Protection Agency expects to begin distributing $7 billion through its Solar for All grants. By funding programs that provide rooftop solar panels, batteries to store solar energy, and community solar farms, the EPA expects to help more than 900,000 low-income households reduce pollution that drives climate change and reduce bills. Electricity bills have risen in recent years, including because utilities are passing along the cost of growing climate-fueled disasters like wildfires on to customers. And more frequent and intense heat waves mean more people need air conditioning, which also adds to bills. Solar programs can shield low-income customers from high electricity bills, but the new federal program faces challenges, including distrust from some low-income communities who think solar is a scam. And while the EPA aims to get this money out of the door in the next few weeks, former President Donald Trump has attacked what he calls the Green New Scam and has campaigned on ending President Joe Biden's energy and climate policies. Rooftop solar adopters still tend to be wealthier than other neighbors. Rooftop solar panels and installations have a median cost of around $30,000 before government incentives, according to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories. But prices for panels and installation are falling, and with more leasing and loan financing programs, there's a quote, slow, steady movement towards more low-income homes with rooftop solar, says Galen Barbos, staff scientist at LBNL. But it isn't just rooftop solar. Director of EPA Office of Greenhouse Gas Reductions Fund, David Witowicki, says the money will also go towards batteries that allow solar customers to store their energy, and it will go towards community solar, which allows customers to tap into solar generated at a shared site like a solar farm. Community solar is a key way for people who have too much shade or can't install rooftop solar for other reasons to participate in solar. It's also helpful for the more than a third of Americans who are renters. Customers typically receive monthly credits for the share of solar they help produce, which reduces their utility bills. Most of the Solar for All money will go through state entities like the Michigan Department of Environment, the West Virginia Office of Energy, and the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet. Those entities then give grants to lending institutions that fund solar and battery projects and to installers and project developers themselves. Some funding will also go to organizations focused on expanding solar for tribal communities. And some money will go through multi-state programs like Grid Alternatives, the solar nonprofit that helped Hugo Salas, an iron worker who paid nothing for his solar panels, get solar in California. Since getting rooftop solar, Salas hasn't paid more than $165 a year for his utility bill from PG&E. California households pay about $147 per month on average to their utilities, according to the nonprofit National Energy Assistance Directors Associate. Having solar also allows Salas to run his air conditioning in his increasingly hot neighborhood. You don't have to worry about saying, oh, I'm going to use a lot of electricity if I use the air conditioning, Salas says. The EPA estimates the program will produce over $350 million in annual savings on electric bills for low-income households. So, a couple of things here that I think is important to note. One thing is that Democrats never get credit for this stuff because people don't understand how the Democrats are making this stuff work. Like the Affordable Care Act, what happens is a lot of the tax savings, a lot of the programs, a lot of the money goes to state run programs so that the states can distribute and can better configure how these programs should be run. The Affordable Care Act worked that way, particularly with things like the individual mandate and things like the exchanges, specifically the exchanges. Kentucky, red Kentucky, had one of the best exchanges in the nation. And people did not realize that the Obamacare, the scary Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, made that possible. They thought that was just good governance on their side because they thought that their legislators had come up with the money and had created the program. The exchange and the structure of the exchange was created by the local governments, but the money, the funding, and how the exchanges work was created by the Affordable Care Act by Barack Obama and his administration, and Democrats, most importantly. Fortunately for Democrats, Republicans did not allow people to forget that Democrats did create this. So while we didn't get, or while Democrats, Barack Obama, didn't get a lot of credit initially, eventually they did. And that's how we ended up right now with a governor in Kentucky that is a Democrat, because the Republicans keep trying to run on dismantling these exchanges, which are very popular in a place like Kentucky, and has brought down, the cost of healthcare in these states. And they're almost pathologically, predisposed to eliminating this. Donald Trump is running on getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, which would get rid of the exchanges. So that's one thing. The second thing is, again, states are beginning to, even Ruby Red, Texas, which is an oil and gas state, has some of the highest adoption of renewables. And they are slowly but surely creating programs locally. And it has said West Virginia, Ruby Red, West Virginia, which is certain to have its next senator not be a Democrat like Joe Manchin, but instead be a Republican, and is going to fight and is going to, if Donald Trump gets in, if the Senate flips to Republican hands, and if it stays in Republican hands in the House, they are sure to try to dismantle, and it says it in the article, dismantle all of these programs that are providing solar for poor people. And there are some of the poorest people live in West Virginia, but they're also the ones that are benefiting the most from solar, as indicated. Kentucky, West Virginia, and it was Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking back very quickly. These programs that are local programs that probably people don't even realize in their state are is getting money from the federal government, from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, is reducing inflation. Inflation is almost to the Fed's target 2%. Many are expecting the Fed to reduce the interest rates by the fall. They did not, I think it was today that they announced, August 1st or the 31st, they announced that they were keeping rates steady. But there is a big expectation that they're going to begin reducing rates. But be that as it may, the people don't seem to realize that this did reduce inflation, and it is giving poor people, people who are struggling, states that are very poor and struggling, like your West Virginias, your Kentuckys, and parts of Michigan, the ability to have renewable energy at low or no cost. And climate change is increasing the heat, the temperatures. We just recently hit the hottest days ever in the history of this, since we've been recording temperatures. We just hit the hottest day, the hottest summer ever. And there are states like Nevada, like Arizona, like Texas, like Florida, that are being, like California, that are being destroyed, by being killed by temperatures that are in triple digits. 110, 108 degrees, steady for weeks. And you need air conditioning. You need some way to mitigate that heat. And electricity bills are going to go through the roof if we don't do something about it. Climate change, as well as lowering electricity bills, are going to be a key factor to keep people from being impoverished and going broke on electricity bills as the planet continues to warm. So, two stories that I thought were very interesting that I wanted to pass on to my listeners, to my viewers on my channel. Thank you very much for joining me once again. You can like and subscribe as always. You can click the bell to be notified of new content, and you'll see me on the next video. Take care, everyone. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.